A shocking double murder.
I just took in the entire scene and kind of broke down in my car.
A stunning confession.
Where was she standing when you shot her?
And now a heartbroken family seeking justice.
How did you learn there was an arrest? We received a phone call stating that he was arrested. What was your reaction to the news? It was a sense of relief.
Neshante's family is mortified to learn the grim and petty reason Deron Boswell Johnson killed his angelic baby daughter.
See, if he had just shot the mother, the child support order would have stayed in place.
This baby was targeted.
She was executed. Yes, this was an intentional act. He walked next to her and put the gun to her head and shot not once but twice at close range. Those bullets were intended for Chloe.
In a tragic irony, according to Neshante's family, Neshante didn't actually want Deron's child support. It was mandated by the court.
The money was never the issue for Neshante. She just wanted to determine the father of her child and wanted him to accept it.
It's terrible. I mean, when you hear something like this.
It is terrible.
And just to have a mom and her baby ambushed and executed.
Ambushed and executed for $600.
Deron is charged. But as the state's attorney preps for trial with Deron's confession on tape, a huge potential problem in the case against him. Deron's defense team claims his confession was made under duress. His attorney wants it thrown out.
He was there alone. The majority of the time, there was either one officer or more to interrogate him, not just talking to him, interrogating him. Because that's the problem. They would see at times the officers pulled their chairs up on them. It was psychological torture, in my opinion.
This was absolutely a voluntary statement. And luckily, it's videotaped for people to see. He never requested a lawyer.
Unwilling to rely on the taped confession in court, prosecutors dig deeper, working overtime to corroborate everything Deron told them in that room. And there was the motive on his computer.
He started conducting these searches on the internet that we were later able to recover, saying how to terminate child support, what happens if you don't pay your child support. He became obsessed with the notion that he was going to have to pay child support.
Deron also had recently been keeping in touch with Neshante via text.
His approach was to start sending her friendly text messages and really hoping that later he could do what he did in this case, which is to come and say, oh, there was no acrimony between us, we were friends.
The ruse didn't work. Investigators find the final text exchange between Neshante and Deron. It's calculated and chilling.
And he actually inquired the night before the murder as to whether or not she'd be going to work. There was a snowstorm, and he said, will you be returning to work tomorrow? And she replied that she would. And so that he knew at that point to sit in front of her home, and he sat there and waited for her to come out of her home that day.
You believe this was premeditated?
Oh, it was absolutely premeditated. I believe the moment that he realized he was not going to be able to terminate this child support order, the plan was in motion.
Prosecutors also build a credible timeline, retracing Deron's movements on the morning of the murders. And even though he told cops he was at home at the time of the shooting,
well, there was surveillance video that showed Boswell Johnson's car leaving his apartment shortly before the murder and then returning back to that apartment after the murder.
But in an era where everyone carries their phone on them at all times, there's an unexplained wrinkle. Deron's cell phone records indicate his phone was home at the time of the murders. Then, one of Deron's co-workers tells investigators Deron actually had two phones, one for work, and that's the one he had with him that morning.
So we ended up getting his phone records later on in the month, which placed his work phone hitting off a tower in close proximity to Palmer Road.
Palmer Road, exactly where Neshante and Chloe lived and died.
We're able actually to corroborate every piece of his story with independent evidence.
But there's still one crucial missing piece to the puzzle, the gun used to commit the murders.
After the confession, Deron actually drew a map on a piece of paper as to where he discarded the gun. And it happened to be a apartment complex in close proximity to his job.
Investigators pull surveillance video from the same apartment complex, and bingo, there's Duran's SUV pulling in shortly after the murders.
Could you tell from that video that it was in fact him?
We could surmise that that was Duran on the video.
After ditching the gun, Duran returned home to see his family before casually heading off to work.
He was a complex person, and as it turns out, he also was evil. To go home, make a cameo appearance so his family could see him, and then drive calmly to work and attempt to go on about his day. So he was a cold-hearted individual, and he was capable of murder.
The murder weapon is never found, but the video confession is allowed in, despite protests from the defense.
For years in our society, people have, through interrogation techniques, admitted to things that they didn't do. Is that unfair? I think the unfairness is the psychological abuse. I strongly believe it was psychological abuse.
It was a very emotionally charged trial, but what I have to tell you is the family of Neshante and Chloe demonstrated more dignity than you can imagine. They were just wonderful.
After several grueling days spent rehashing that tragic February morning, the verdict lies in the jury's hands, and it doesn't take long. Guilty.
It was, what, a 2-hour deliberation?
It was a 2-hour deliberation. And after several days of testimony, that's a quick deliberation.
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, they were convinced.
For Neshante and Chloe's family, the relief is overwhelming.
It's like a weight being lifted to know that he wouldn't escape his actions and that he would suffer a consequence for his actions.
Do you think the state proved without a reasonable doubt that Duran was the person who pulled the trigger?
He's entitled to defense, and he got a defense. And we were entitled to justice, and we got justice.
But no amount of justice can heal such a tragic loss.
I do believe that justice is served, but I don't believe that there's closure.
That's why Chloe and Neshante's family is channeling their pain into something positive.
In honor of your sister and Chloe, you're doing something.
We've created a foundation entitled Neshante and Chloe House Without Walls, and that foundation is to educate men, women, and children on the warning signs and other options in regards to domestic violence. We plan to, in the future, have scholarships for those that want to continue in education and continue Neshante's footsteps.
Her and Chloe's deaths are not in vain.
Not at all.
Boswell Johnson's attorney tells us he plans to appeal and ask for a retrial, saying that the police did not attempt to consider other suspects with motives and that his client was not effectively allowed to confront detectives' trial testimony. I'm Chris Hansen. If you like this story, make sure you tune in every day to Crime Watch Daily. You can find where the show airs in your city at crimewatchdaily.com. Watch it live or record it on your DVR and watch it at night. And to all those criminals out there, remember, we are watching.